My first year of architecture school, we were required to do all the drawings by hand for the studio courses. So my background in fine art that I had came in handy a little bit. This was for Design Communication 1 under Professor Gerard Smilovich. We did exercises in diagramming sequence that came directly from the project we did for the other class, Studio. We did exercises in graphite rendering, portraying lighting conditions specifically for this design comm class, along with exercises in exploded axonometrics and color pencil rendering, which we translated into projected orthographic drawings. So this wasn't directly giving us the tools to practice architecture. It was training us to think spatially and three-dimensionally and giving us the tools to translate three-dimensional space into two-dimensional representation. We didn't know anything really about building code yet or zoning code yet or building systems or anything like that. In the studio class, each student was given an object that we were to dissect, then put back together in a sculptural way. We did orthographic drawings of the arrangements of the objects, along with pencil renderings of the object intact. So the object assigned was manipulated and rearranged, and then elevated by a display of some sort. The display I made mimicked the form of the arrangement of the objects. The display employed slits in an encompassing manner below the objects being displayed, and it frames the arrangement at human eye level. We were to put an object in this drawing to give it scale so you can know how big this object is. I chose to put a hand in there. We did axonometric drawings describing the final form of the display, orthographic drawings of the arrangement of objects, and were to photograph to document the final display. Another project for 1A, the first semester of first year, was to create an 8-inch by 8-inch by 8-inch cube that could break into 5 pieces and reconnect with pure joinery. So they can't just sit next to each other or be glued and have to be pulled apart. It was to reflect the memory we had. I chose to reflect my memory of visiting the Colosseum and represented the decay, heaviness, and the qualities of light and shadow. I did representational drawings of my memory of the Colosseum, diagrams of the joinery methods, and an exploded axonometric drawing of the cube. Here you see the final cube in the closed position and the exploded position. For 1B, second semester of first year, we did 5 projects in studio. Each one had a slightly different site and a particular element assigned. This one was called Mind the Gap. So we would choose an activity to go along with the spaces we were designing. I chose to create a place to ponder and confess our sins and create praying areas. There were 2 praying areas that served as preludes, taking one back in time in layers. Earth is constructed in layers which are constantly refreshed, leaving the most recent layer on top. The deeper we go into Earth, usually the further back we go in time. So this was a place to pray. The methodology is repetition, for which Shigeru Ban is a suitable mentor. We had an architecture designer assigned as a mentor who we wouldn't actually meet, who was, a well-known established architect, usually not even in California, but they would become a mentor of sorts in our own heads. So that was Shigeru Ban. Repetition. I had first worked on a version where the longer elements would connect to a part of the surface on top, but decided to connect them at a point in the sky like a flame, so it would resemble a candle or a torch. The central structure points upward, which is where one's attention might be while praying. Same semester, different site, different project. This one was a cliff. I think the element I had for the last project was earth. The element for this project was wood. Wood is associated with strength and flexibility. It's also known to reach for the sun as part of a tree to compete for sunlight with other plants. The theme of reaching is present in walking meditation. That was the activity I chose for this one. As one reaches for a higher level of consciousness, but maybe that's not true meditation. Maybe true meditation is not reaching, it's meditating for the sake of meditating. Anyway, Santiago Calatrava was the mentor I chose for this one. He's a Spanish architect and engineer. I think he was a suitable mentor for this project because many of his buildings are skyscrapers and they appear to reach for the sky. His Fordham Spire for Chicago was planned to be the tallest building in America. I also drew inspiration from his bridges, which expose the skeletons of the forms and are made of thin strips. I also imitate Calatrava's habit of abstracting the human body with a metaphor of a reaching arm. So he did the twisting torso, I did the reaching arm. We had a group project for this class, Materials and Methods. We were to reconstruct a portion of the building with steel and glass. The building we were assigned was the San Francisco Federal Building designed by Morphosis, and we 3D modeled this portion of the building as well as physically making it. Did an exploded version of the digital model and an intact version of this portion of the building through the physical recreation. I think we were a group of 4. Second year, first semester, first project, we were to design a pavilion. Material and program are to be considered and interconnected if possible. The term assigned to define the project was vending. Copper and steel are used to have different effects from different angles, and the reverse perspective is used with the structural members to create the illusion of two-dimensionality from the bus stop in some way. There's a view from the bike path, there's a view from the adjacent sidewalk. These are some preliminary sketches and study models. The next project of 2A was a film studio. This concept diagram describes the sequence and the experience of viewing the building relative to persistence of vision in film. A standard film is a compilation of individual frames shown in a sequence. A shutter is required between each image to prevent the viewer from seeing a blur of images. The shutter is usually placed more frequently than the frame to avoid flickering, which results in each frame being shown more than once. This can be symbolized in architecture with the structure representing the shutter, as both are necessary, and the decorative walls we use to conceal the structure representing the frames, as both achieve a desired outcome. The facade facing Lankershim Boulevard shows this to the pedestrians by covering the structure, displaying it, and covering it again as they pass the building. The sequence resembles the sequence of frames and shutters in film. We had some professional practice classes. This was from ProPrac 1, where we drew wall sections, floor plans, and floor framing plans. The first project of 2B was a transformation, and each of us was given a different site to transform. Mine was Saadiyat Island, which has a design by Tadawando, a design by Frank Gehry, a design by Zaha Hadid, and a design by Jean Nouvel. I took elements from each project, got out my pencil and started sketching like mad, got out my Olfa knife and started cutting out my sketch and doing that again, and then folding them on top of each other, subtracting elements, adding those subtracted elements, composing them, cellularizing like Zaha, and filtering light like Jean Nouvel. The next project for 2B was a land museum. I chose to do flowing modules. Observing the behavior of the river throughout the site inspired a manipulation of planes in which water translates to circulation and the lack of water translates to program. The earth protrudes above the water slightly, blocking the circulation of water, as the program blocks or welcomes a natural human circulation of the land museum around the program elements of a sky room, exhibition space, earth room, green room, map room, etc. The site plan shows the hiking paths and rivers' interactions with the land museum. These are early study models and conceptual images. The final model portrays the site with vertically cut topography and diagrammatically shows the building's interior-exterior relationship with gray and white. Gray exterior and circulation, white interior program element. This was a Revit mini studio. It was my first time using Revit. We were to design a triplex. The 3 living units are designed for a painter, a filmmaker, and a photographer. The north side of the building, which will receive ambient sunlight, contains large windows to create a well-lit interior. The south side of the building is mostly covered to minimize the amount of heat taken into the building through glazing. The design is driven by the desire to create spaces with minimal ornamentation to allow the artist to display and examine their work without the architecture interfering with the elements of their artwork. The roof is angled towards the south for direct sunlight on the solar panels. This concrete form provides isolation and privacy from the street and acts as outdoor seating. Large glass panels on the north-facing facade allow for ambient light into the building. The south-facing wall extends a bit to provide shade for the vertical west-facing glass. I made a physical model and took photos of it at different times of day showing how the shadow will move, and drew a wall section from the north and a wall section from the south. Here you see the floor plans, sections, and diagrams showing how the spaces are arranged. The blue-green version shows the arrangement of the overall project. The orange-red diagram shows the arrangement of each particular unit, which is actually on 3 levels. I took an advanced digital rendering class where we were doing kit bashing or model bashing. We would make new models from found parts of other models. It was to allow for abstract renderings that focus on the composition and framing of the image. Another technique we explored during the course involved a system of lights that illuminate a space from the interior. This allows one to control the focus of the viewer onto the more developed parts of a project and move away from the underdeveloped or unimportant areas. That same semester, we were doing a 90-plex, and I did some conceptual renderings of that in this class. The first studio project for 3A was to do a hybrid drawing. I was assigned the Mackey Apartments by Schindler. I wanted to show how Schindler celebrated interlocking and how the windows were quite repetitive, and show the interior in the drawing as much as I can. The repetitive windows became the floor plans. Part of the elevation is cut away to reveal the section, and the elevation continues to show perspectives of the interior. These are preliminary sketches. We each designed the triplex. I chose disassociation as my theme of the triplex and tried to give each unit a different feel. The venture began with my interpretation of the site and the translation of that site into architecture. The river separates the residential realm from the disorderly terrain and the freeway, while the shared circulation separates the unit, indicative of residential architecture, and the disorderly geometry of the two neighboring units. Each unit has a view suggestive of its analogical relationship to the site. The unit indicative of residential architecture faces its residents. The unit that begins to suggest a less orderly geometry faces the disorderly landscape. And the third and most chaotic unit faces itself with an inner opening to flood light into the unit from above. Unit 1 is exposed to ambient light from the north and blocks from the southern sun. Unit 2 contains a thermal mass and an operable skylight for flushing out the heat at night. Unit 3 keeps cool by being sunk into the earth, where there's a steady 57-degree temperature. Could have probably been sunk a little bit more if this me was back in that studio. You see preliminary sketches I did. I took my digital elevations and drew over them by hand with colored pencils. Did exploded perspectives to show the landscaping of deciduous trees and grass, defined by concrete patterning, the fabric, the insulated metal panels, secondary structure, primary structure, and the concrete thermal mass. Final rendering at human eye level, process renderings, and the hybrid drawing again. We took what we learned in the last exercise where I was assigned the Mackey apartments and applied that strategy and the projecting strategy we used in the first year to the projects that we designed in studio. So that was a solo project, and then we went to a group project, learning how to work together and not butt heads. We did a 90-plex, a 90-unit housing project. We called this project the Ravine. The cross-shaped circulation on the ground floor created this 4-tower arrangement. The interior walls acted as shear panels. They punctured through the residential enclosure and defined the retail dividers. We did first floor retail, which further supplant the cross-shaped nature of the retail. Each tower has a different height. The habitable roofs connect the various heights with a system of stairs and ramps. And the habitable roofs are faceted with slight angles in an attempt to force gathering in certain areas. The geometry will also suggest the direction for the people to face to frame certain desirable views. The facades will overstate the inherent verticality of the tower with patterned cladding. On the south, there was a trellis of sorts with similar verticality, and it kind of pulled away from the facade. The trellis had solar panels and plants to soften the sun coming in. We embedded a void into the 8th floor of the tallest tower, which appeared to be carved out of the solid form. The residents on each floor share a small courtyard which extends past the boundaries of the facade. We gave a different type of window to each facade depending on its solar orientation. Did diagrams showing how the program is arranged in the section. Second semester of third year, we went back to individual projects. It was a case study again. I was assigned the water cube by PTW architects. Each student did multiple drawings of the project they were assigned. I also did some diagrammatic ones showing the soap bubbles that inform the structural system of the building. We did study models of the project to describe the space three-dimensionally. So I did that with chipboard and then did a more accurate final model for this case study using metal pipes and acrylic sheets. Next project, again, individual project, was a cultural outreach center. The site was the Bayona wetlands. It's one of the few significant wetlands that remain in California, but the area is becoming heavily industrialized. The creek has been channelized in concrete, and much of the farm fields have been destroyed to allow for the construction of Hughes Airport. However, the site continues to serve as a home to various types of wildlife, namely picturesque birds like herons. The community center I designed was elevated to minimize the building's footprint and allow the ecosystem to thrive. The building begins to bridge underneath the freeway, but quickly opens up to the surrounding nature as it extends into the island, suggesting a positive outcome for the Bayona wetlands. The community center was to inform visitors about the history of the wetlands and about the critical condition of the site. I did a photoshopped site plan using one of the study models I had made, collaging it with the cardboard site I made and an aerial photograph of the site. Drew a plan in section and diagrammed the spaces into the floor plan. And did a diagram to show the two paths of circulation peel away from each other, as one allows access to the bike path and observation tower, and the other allows access to the community and educational spaces. Physical model showing the primary and secondary structure. Sketches show the building's movement
from industrial to natural. Last project of 3B was a group project. My partner was Arthur Nestorenko, professor was Gerard Smolovich. Again, the site was the Bayona Wetlands, located in Southern California. We designed a PTSD treatment center as a spa, in a way, that was lifted above the wetlands to preserve the land by its bending nature. This makes for a large building that only makes contact with the ground in two areas and strengthens the structure by forming an arch. The twist of the structure makes it a spectacle from the freeway and raises awareness of post-traumatic stress, while representing a metaphorical twist in the victims of PTSD and the building twisting them back into shape. Steel as a building material represents the most contemporary in architecture and allows for curved surfaces and long spans. The building serves as a retreat from the harshness of the city and creates a place of meditation in the heart of the wetlands. By being secluded and separated, it allows for peaceful reflection and reconnection with self. The journey through the building and the surrounding nature guides one to his or her true nature. Living in our modern times is a stressful endeavor and leaves one with no time to spare. The treatment center will encourage the people inhabiting it to spend time reflecting and breaking away from the unhealthy habits that have become widely accepted in our society. Next, I took a summer studio and we studied abroad to French Polynesia with instructors Ingela Walrus-Ritter and Randy Stauffer. I called the project Layered Legends. While we were within French Polynesia, I did some sketches trying to display the rich and abundant local mythology of the island of Wahine, which spread merely by word of mouth. The culture values artifacts that take time and skill to create, but this notion isn't really reflected in its architecture. The buildings are mostly bland. We each proposed a pavilion. I proposed a place for the recording of myths, legends, and history for locals. It includes facilities for recording audio and storing written text, and can be used as a lecture hall or concert hall. The pavilion is constructed of layers of plywood, held together with steel tensile structures. Protrusions and depressions within the carefully assembled layers of plywood make for spaces of recording, writing, and storage. I did a physical model, digital drawings, physical drawings, and did a map of Wahine, French Polynesia. For 4A, my instructor was Clark Stevens and partner was Arthur Bedalian. We had a budget of $50,000 to create a source of inhabitation. So how do we create simple, ecologically sound, culturally and aesthetically appropriate homesteads on rural properties? A $50,000 budget immensely confines our use of materials and forces us to be patient and flexible. Looking for building materials that we can attain for relatively low cost, we came across the sturdy and readily available wooden pallet, which is typically used to support goods while they are being transported. The pallets are used as modules to construct flooring with integrated beams and walls with reinforcing structure. They are simple to assemble, and each pallet contains an inner cavity that can be filled with various elements imperative to architecture, like the beams, columns, insulation, and piping for other building systems, electrical, gas, plumbing if the area gets it. Those systems aren't there yet. So with just enough to meet the habitation needs for the future ranch owners in Littlewood, Idaho, the cabin celebrates its context. For the outdoor enthusiast, there's no need to build extensive improvements that are wasteful and high impact ecologically. We located the view shed and sun, defined the views through the hills and valleys, carved out our openings on the elevations, drew maps and site plans and diagrams, developed a different west pallet unit from a south pallet unit, and the west wall assembly and south wall assembly and the floor assembly. We then located the solar energy collection for the LED light on the south facing roof, where we framed the North Star with that opening on the north that created, planned for a cistern that would tie into the bathtub, incorporated a fireplace and firewood storage, with the firewood storage adding extra insulation, gave it a 47-degree roof angle to frame the North Star at night and to guide the rainwater into the cistern, showed how we could open those panels up top to bring in the cool air and let the hot air flow out through the top. Did a lot of physical models, study models, and a large final model, along with an exploded axonometric and a lot of renderings. A lot of hours, a lot of days, a lot of nights spent on these projects. That same semester, we had a class called Systems Integration, and again, Arthur Bedalian was my partner. We 3D modeled the float house designed by Morphosis, along with its building systems, and composed this board of the project. For 4B, I was given the site of a post-earthquake Haiti under Professor Eric Olson. I called the project Peripheral Cup and subtitled it Renourishing the Artibonite River Valley. I chose Artibonite. In the aftermath of a post-earthquake Haiti, the project takes the form of a linear city, incorporating a series of water collection, treatment, and distribution facilities. The region's cholera outbreak is a fleeting problem, but it has exposed a vulnerability in the country's water supply. The water collection begins by defining reservoirs with the natural topography of the Artibonite River region. After achieving clean water distribution,
The next stages of intervention are to commence, anticipating tourism and higher education. A few hundred miles away, we find the Dominican Republic, with similar climate, where a high percentage of residents have access to clean drinking water and resorts are filled with tourists. Using the Dominican Republic as a case study, the proposal anticipates more tourism along with further urbanization and agriculture. Through these diagrams, I show the first step is to observe water runoff and locate catchment, then to define housing, anticipate growth outside of the floodplain. In the section, you see the steel canopy for shade, the concrete water retaining wall, the osmosis membrane, and the polyethylene distribution tube encased in steel. Diagrams showing that higher education plus clean water will lead to a higher GDP and more tourism. I looked at the GDP rate per capita, the literacy rate, number of tourists per year, the deaths from cholera, cases of cholera, and population per square kilometer. So Haiti as a site made sense, which was assigned to me, but then within Haiti, I chose Artibonite because that made sense as a site to me, due to the really high number of deaths from cholera compared to the population per square kilometer.
Early in this design studio, I was doing things by hand, drawing by hand, doing physical models to figure things out. And I was doing the water catchment and distribution at smaller scales, within and around the existing housing, before going digital and defining the reservoirs based on the existing topography within the natural areas before they would come into the built environment.
First semester of fifth year, we had professional practice 2, where we did research for our thesis projects or our degree projects. I had Heather Peterson as my instructor. The diversion of potable water from Owens Valley to Los Angeles dried up Owens Lake and left the town of Keeler, California with a mere 66 inhabitants. The humble town is brimming with abandoned structures and empty lots between streets, with unspecified spaces that I think should be preserved and celebrated because they're quite beautiful. The lake bed contains toxic dust, which scatters in the wind as a result of dryness, summer prevailing winds carrying it northward and winter prevailing winds carrying it southward. It has been identified as the largest source of particulate air pollution within the United States. The site is simultaneously deadly and beautiful, with red discoloration forming in the small bodies of water from the excessive bacteria and arsenic dust plumes floating above the horizon. I looked at it as a potential destination for disaster tourism. 5B, the final semester of my Bachelor of Architecture degree. I chose to do my degree project about disaster tourism, driven by many people's morbid fascinations with unfavorable conditions, which often hinder the recoveries of struggling ecologies. But perhaps this type of tourism can instigate a positive change. It can at least educate. In the case of Owens Dried Lake, located conveniently between Los Angeles and the popular destination of Mammoth Lakes, the west-facing surfaces of the proposed disaster tourist accommodations collect critical amounts of the arsenic and soda ash-infested dust blowing in the wind, keeping some of them away from the nearby town of Keeler. Opportunities are created for packaging the soda ash as a preservative and feeding the toxins to arsenic-eating bacteria, which have been recently discovered in Mono Lake, while raising awareness of the fragile ecosystem by means of inhabitation. Particulate matter is entrapped on the electrostatic skin, rendering the interior habitable. The lake's corpse provides an incendiary yet serene backdrop, fit for planetary alarm conferences, Davos West, if you will. Travelers are brought into contact with the site by forking a road to Mammoth, utilizing this existing berm. Many of the goals of the project are met by creating a rest stop for passing by travelers on long drives. This behind me is an image I drew on Canson paper with pencil for my degree project early in the process. I found it recently and put it up. I threw a lot of things away, but I kept this one because I didn't even remember making this one. And looking at it, I'm seeing new aspects of the project. So I want to spend some time with this before tossing it. I did a 30-day declutter challenge. There's a video on my page where I got rid of a lot of things. Then I went to grad school on the East Coast. I'm not going to do this portion chronologically. I'm going to do it in order of the type of classes. So first I'm going to go through the visual studies, then the seminars, then the studios. For the first visual study, I learned Maya and After Effects. Undergrad was mostly Rhino, Photoshop, Illustrator, and design, with a little bit of AutoCAD. So I made this animation thinking of the straight line as an incredible abstraction of form where our species has been, and where our species has been, we find this abstraction. Vastly different from the nature we grew out of. We've become refined beings, finding beauty in these crude shapes. To arrange these straight lines in harmonious compositions entails more than proportioning systems based on the golden section or Fibonacci sequence. This is not the way these ratios are used in nature. It is another crude abstraction. It can be done. The works of Mies van der Rohe and the more contemporary sauna prove this. But for this project, I was interested in achieving beauty through biomorphism, looking to the forms, the wiggles of nature, and the more difficult task of biomimicry, mimicking the performance of nature to maximize efficiency. Photovoltaics is a powerful example of this, mimicking photosynthesis. The jellyfish illusion within the project is not particularly biomimetic to a satisfying degree, as its biomimetic elements are autonomous. The biomorphism here is arguably purely formal. It is probably a backward step towards progression, but a step nonetheless. It's a step that was fun to make. However, it is a natural configuration to take for the solar hot air balloon in combination with its wind-generating element. The human being is forced into tight situations to hint at extremes of density, but the body is not in a state of discomfort. The sleep capsule does not need additional space. Limitless spatial environments manifest within the inhabitants' dreams. So this was the first animation I made using Maya and After Effects. The next one I made was for the next visual study called Animated Computation. This was made in Maya again. The lines between what is organic and inorganic, machine and human, nature and not nature are becoming increasingly blurred. The robotic being hatches from an egg, in a counterintuitive process. The egg, the organic, cloth-like flowing object, is a hindrance. The machine becomes freed and takes on its life, until the confines of the larger context take their toll. Toxic AI control attaches to our protagonist and alters its actions shortly after the hatching. Binary space. The elites, to generalize, have an established and symbolic architecture of icons. Reformists do not really, except for the lightweight, deployable, improvised, and inexpensive architecture that is the architecture of change, heightened by its contrast to conventional surroundings. However, one wonders, would the structures of Lebbeus Woods contain their beauty and tasteful brutality if they were in fact ad hoc? Lebbeus composed these beautifully, in my opinion. Would they be this powerful if they were improvised by their builders and made only with available materials? Woods displays a very particular use of geometry, which one may better understand by means of digitally modeling them, and attempting to, in the most abstract sense of the phrase, inhabit the space. So for this class, we were using UDK, the Unreal Development Kit, and we were able to choose what we were 3D modeling. I chose designs of Lebbeus Woods. I attempt, like a painter, to learn from the masters. I took another visual study called Bodycraft. I was and am really interested in lucid dreams and lucid dreaming. One of the ways I know I'm in a dream is when I look at my hand and it has the wrong number of fingers. And I also worked on a headset that would have lights to tell you you're dreaming so you could go lucid during them for this class. Then there was Encoded Matter with Ezio Blassetti under the Francois Roche studio, kind of. We first began with a surface that waved, and the waving surface refracted its normals to a distance below. We then layered the surfaces with evolving wave patterns below the initial waving surface that also refract points a certain number of units below. This series of points finally forms the irregular structure through connections based on proximity, still linked to the original surface. This was Rhino, Grasshopper, and Python. Then for one of the seminars, we studied Kyoto Station and the activation of the public realm, looked at the existing project, and made a few modifications as a proposal. The Kyoto train station suffers from the condition of unfriendly, iconic architecture. Though it is effective aesthetically, the intense enclosure and lack of connection in the prominent stair element create a sense of isolation and misplacedness. The inspiration, as stated by the architect, was the quintessential public element of the Spanish Steps. What Hiroshi Hara may have forgotten was the connection of two already active territories that come into play, not two new forced territories with a forced connection. The design studios were group projects. The first one was located in Two Bridges, Manhattan. We called it a new old. We created an accessible path network with rest areas no greater than 1/8 of a mile apart to extend the distance the elderly population can walk. We created new housing with mixed age groups and some micro-unit housing with shared spaces for social interaction and efficiency in housing floor area. The next group studio project we called The Hook. It was located in Red Hook, Brooklyn, and we were preparing for floods because a flood actually happened there while we were in New York. So how can a more sustainable core community be created in Red Hook? Red Hook's once vibrant and active working waterfront was rendered nearly useless with the advent of containerization.
with an increasing number of storms and hurricanes that flood the entire site, its potential for growth of local businesses and future development also diminishes. Today, the water's edge is being used by anchor tenants such as IKEA, Fairway Market, and the Brooklyn Cruise Terminal, serving a socioeconomic demographic that is foreign to the immediate site. The current residents of Red Hook have thriving new neighbors, yet receive little economic activity. Currently, the regional and international visitors only pass through the town to go to these 3 destinations. They overlook Red Hook completely. With The Hook, which we call the project, proposed commercial and green corridors, visitors, including Brooklyn Cruise Terminal users, can be linked to the rest of Red Hook, generating revenue and creating employment for the local community. This new urban, political, and infrastructural system begins to share resources, transportation, and human capital among the new commercial tenants, while mediating the inevitability of the rising water levels and storm surges. Step 1, create green pockets with community gardens that double as urban furniture, open to the public, and can create elevated escapes as a green sponge when it floods. Step 2, cluster manufacturing. Clustering the manufacturing would create shorter truck paths and share the loading docks for the warehouses. Step 3, connect to the commercial at the human scale and pedestrian level. We did an analysis of existing industries for Red Hook, Greenpoint, and Navy Yard, and clustered the type of industries to see which there was the most of and which there was the least of. I spent a lot of time in Illustrator getting this diagram just right. Our group of 3 called this last studio project that we did for this Master of Science in Architecture and Urban Design degree Emerald City. We traveled to Bordeaux, France to visit the site, did some comparative diagrams with other sites to identify how we wanted to organize this site, which is on the Ring Road, or Rocade, of Bordeaux. The symbolic intersection of the Garonne River, which was central to Bordeaux's infrastructure and economy, and the Rocade, which marks its current status, is the location of our site in Bouliac. Today, a poorly planned Auchan superstore to its north and a floodable area, or zone humid, an area that floods sometimes to the south, are bisected by the Ring Road. The land of the superstore and much of the flooded fields share one owner who has attempted but been unable to build on the green space. Emerald City attempts to incentivize the transformation of the landscape into a regionally advantageous large park by adding buildable area to the land north of the Rocade in exchange for preservation and enhancement of the green area to the south, and connecting the two. 50-50 was the actual motto of the urban community of Bordeaux to express intentions to contain an equal amount of green and built area within the agglomeration of La Cube, the community urbaine of Bordeaux. So we ran with that. The proposed strategy of development, preservation, and transformation creates a postcard image as one approaches the right bank. The 50-50 exemplified by Emerald City incorporates and is in fact formed by another symbolic element of Bordeaux, the Rocade. The Rocade, Ring Road, is viewed in a positive light as a necessary and efficient means of transportation, and the former of the city. The postcard image created is one of density and urban fabric placed against a large park, divided and defined by the François Mitterrand Bridge of the Ring Road. Pools are carved at the park's edge, seasonally flooded. Agriculture is integrated with spaces for vending. Botanical gardens provide a cultural center. Sporting facilities provide local gathering for leisure. And a new bridge connects the urban density over the Rocade, encouraging pedestrian gathering. The built environment to the north is more effectively planned, employing verticality within parking to densify it, freeing up space for the public realm, as well as introducing a mix of hotels, offices, and housing. Emerald City is a mini manifestation of the urban realm of Bordeaux, with its dense fabric and preserved accessible green as its identifying elements. We looked at the modes of traffic and intensities, with thicker being more intense, thinner less intense. The heavy traffic in Bouliac provides an opportunity to reach more people with an experiential intervention, a spectacle from the Rocade. When we look closely at the experiences along the 4 chosen locations, we see that 3 have dispersed areas of green and built, while the 4th, in Bouliac, has a strong sense of separation between landscape and fabric. We looked at the view shed to diagram the view every 20 seconds of the passenger traveling at an average speed on the Rocade exposes the opportunity provided by this specific location. A sense of oneness around the highway provides long views beyond, making the potential intervention more visible and more of an identity marker. Vehicular circulation, pedestrian circulation, park circulation, landscape features, we diagrammed all of it. Densification. The massing strategy of the mineral half of the proposal is designed with the scale and sentiment of the surrounding area and of Bordeaux as a whole. The larger buildings at the periphery of the fabric towards the Rocade gesture towards the existing forces, including the Garonne and the flood dike. The proposal allows for exceptional views of both the densification and the preservation.
In times of flooding, the excess water is carried through proposed water channels and collected in catchment areas. The catchment locations add ecological value to the park. The park is designed to be mostly neutral and preserved with minimal interventions.
You guys seen this thing?
What is that?
It's the new product from Put It Out There.
Oh, that's nice. What are these colors?
I guess it comes in like red, blue, green. Looks like there's purple even. It's a washing machine on the right. I think that's a little grill on the left.
Is it expensive?
Not really. It's pretty well priced.
What is these languages?
I don't know. I guess it's a marketing thing.
Interesting.
So I don't remember what class that last video was for, but I know it was for grad school, and my partner was Sagi Golan, and we got some other classmates to help us with the voiceover. These are some other miscellaneous projects that I did in grad school, and I don't remember what class they were for. Those two images on the right of the dense wooden models were made with myself and Kevin Lay. I remember us being partners, and they were inspired by the designs of Yona Friedman. The top left was a study model made, I believe, for one of the studios real quick as a charrette. I don't remember which one or what it was about. And those two images of me with a thing on my head were made for a design charrette where we were to make urban recorders that we would wear on our bodies. And I got pieces of paper that were, I think, 11 by 17 and drew on them and cut them out and put it over my head. I remember that urban recorder being the first thing we did as kind of an icebreaker. And I think that's what it was. I think that was summer 2012 when I was just starting this program. That's it for this video. Over the next few weeks, we're going to get into the architectural work that I did outside of school and after school. So stick around for that. Share this video with a colleague. Like, comment, subscribe. Hit me up for potential collaborations. More content is on the screen. Check it out. And I'll catch you all next week. Peace.
Leonardo from Vinci, brush simply, just lifts me publicly, sculpt briskly, just whimsy, come diss me. Michelangelo, wait, you're a phony at best. This whole thing in Florence you spent years on, holding the edge of a chisel looks forced, it's a mess. You just sketch at least a portion and then check the proportions again.